What's up, fellow collectors? Welcome back to the M.I.B. Master Toy Museum. I'll be your curator today. Guys, we have another fantastic episode of Coffee Time with M.I.B. Guys, another very tough topic of discussion. And like I said, guys, I do my best thinking over a hot cup of coffee. So guys, wherever you're at, pull up a chair. This is definitely going to be a really fantastic show. Get your favorite brand of coffee and let's dive right into it. Guys, today we're covering a topic that kind of strikes a nerve in collectors, vintage collectors, modern collectors, but it strikes a nerve nonetheless. I was looking at one of my, reading some information off of one of my collector pages on Facebook, and I noticed that a collector had just recently purchased the Skeletor Super 7, the Super 7 Skeletor action figure, Masters of the Universe action figure. And it's a beautiful figure. And he simply just wanted to know, he was just trying to gather information on what type of protective casing he should use for this particular figure. You know, it comes in these vintage retro cards that they actually came on back in the early 1980s, 81, 82, 83, 84, you know. And another collector kind of chimed in on his comment and said, well, you do realize that that's not a vintage Skeletor. And it got me to thinking, is the reproduction figures actually hurting the vintage market? Are they? Is that possible? Can the vintage market be hurt by the reproduction and modern market of these figures? Everyone doesn't have, thousands of dollars, or hundreds of dollars to spend on a vintage He-Man that is mint on card. Okay, let's just start right there. I mean, who has that type of money? So Super 7 and other companies like Super 7 has taken it upon themselves to recreate or reproduce, hence the word reproduction, these figures. Painstakingly making these guys as accurate as possible. Now, these guys are from the cartoon series, which they are excellent versions and reproductions of the actual cartoon versions, not the vintage He-Man versions. Although Super 7 does have those as well. But it got me to thinking. And I wanted to pose the question here over a hot cup of coffee with my fellow subscribers and viewership. Are these Super 7 Masters of the Universe figures, are they actually hurting the vintage market. I read where a vintage collector said, yes, these newer Masters of the Universe figures from Super 7 are actually hurting the market, because who wants to buy a vintage figure for $800 to $1,000 if you can get the exact same figure reproduced, a reproduction, exact likeness of that figure, packaged exactly the same way for, let's say, $20? You would look at that and say, yes, the vintage market is being hurt financially, and it's taken away something. Or I'm asking this question, guys. I'm not necessarily saying that I believe this format or this type of thinking, but I am asking and posing this question: are these figures hurting the vintage figures? Because now you're flooding the market with these beautiful replications of the originals. Skeletor doesn't want to focus, guys. Let's make Skeletor focus. Focus, Skeletor. There you go. You're flooding these guys, flooding these markets, collector markets, with figures that are going for cheaper prices, good quality, because these figures aren't on the rubber band type system. They're on a different system, from what I'm being told. So they're more sturdier. And I've heard negative things about these figures as well. But what are your thoughts? Let's bring Hordak down here. What are your thoughts? I mean, you have this beautiful Hordak figure for $20. Why would I want to purchase a vintage Hordak figure that's probably going to run me somewhere anywhere from $600 to $700 to even $1,000 or more, depending upon the condition of that Hordak figure and the card that it's on? And you have some collectors say, well, I have to have vintage. And that's fine. But for people that can't afford vintage and would love to have the He-Man figure that they remember as having as a kid growing up in the 1980s, this is a fantastic solution to that and remedy to that. And we saw that with the new Star Wars figures that recently came out that are being exclusively sold, I believe, at Target. Are the reproduction figures killing the vintage market? Those are the questions we want to pose to you guys today over a hot cup of coffee here at the M.I.B. Master Toy Museum. We're going to step on some toes. We understand that aspect, because you have a lot of vintage collectors out there that simply, one vintage collector called the Super 7 Masters of the Universe, he called it an abomination, an absolute abomination. These toys should not exist. If you can't afford vintage Masters of the Universe action figures, then that's really basically he was saying it's tough on you. Let's bring our beautiful Skeletor down. These figures, to vintage collectors, to most vintage collectors, I guess, are seen as an abomination. Absolute travesty that Super 7 would produce these figures. They're hurting the market, the vintage market, because you're flooding these figures. It's taken away from the collectability of the vintage He-Man action figures. Is that the case, guys? Your thoughts, your opinions, your emotions. We want to hear all of that. We're looking at our He-Man. This is a beautiful rendition. And this is from the cartoon, guys. This is not from the Mattel toy line. This is from the cartoon, the way we wanted the actual figures to look like. Their cartoon counterparts. And we know we have a lot of Masters of the Universe subscribers and fans and collectors here at the M.I.B. Master Toy Museum. We want you guys to feel free to answer these hot topics of discussion. You're gonna step on toes, guys. The vintage collectors, like I said, that one particular collector absolutely believes that these figures are an absolute abomination and should not be produced. How do you feel? Is the market being flooded by these reproductions? Is that hurting the vintage toy community? Do you even care? I mean, I'm happy that, you know, for $20, I can get a fantastic and beautiful Skeletor, mint on card, unpunched, Masters of the Universe action figure. I'm thrilled to death that I can get a He-Man Masters of the Universe unpunched carded figure for $20. And the same with our beautiful Hordak figure. These are all beautiful reproduction museum pieces at this point, which should be taken care of and viewed as a beautiful piece, you know, to your collection, your Masters of the Universe toy collection. But are too many of these reproduction figures flooding the market and hurting our vintage line of Masters of the Universe toys? We want to leave it there, guys. Enjoy the rest of your coffee. Enjoy the rest of your day. You know the routine, guys. God bless. And keep collecting.